Hello, welcome. My name's Alan Rossi. I'm chair of the creative writing department. Thank you, thank you. Welcome to our winter readings for the senior class. What can I say about these seniors? Shirts and hats, everyone's wearing pants. I'm sorry. So these students have now completed the first half of their senior year, and the growth from junior year is apparent to anyone who's been watching. These writers are creating with a newly developed maturity, depth, and understanding of craft. And the reason they're writing so well is because they're working so hard, and not just within their classes. For instance, some of these seniors, who I haven't even taught this year, have brought me drafts of stories written outside of class in order to get notes for revision. Others have brought me older stories from last year in order to have those stories edited and revised. In other words, they are doing the work of our very demanding classes, and at the same time they are going above and beyond, writing and revising more than is asked of them. So to me, this is the mark of the true writer, the true artist. Someone who can't help but to keep reworking old drafts and can't help but to keep from writing new ones in order to try again and do better. I'm extremely impressed by them because they do this. Don't get big egos before you come up here, though. This year, 2 of these students won Young Arts Awards. To go along with the winner from last year, one student is a finalist with distinction and heading to Miami for some workshops and work with other artists. Normally I don't talk too much about awards, but I think it's important for this audience to know just how hard these students work, toiling over drafts, trying things and getting it wrong, failing and then trying again, and it's important to know that they've been rewarded for that. The awards really speak to a collective effort, one in which we're always aiming to help each other improve, to improve our understanding of a story, a poem, or an essay, to improve our understanding of what art is for, and to improve our understanding even of ourselves. And I'm grateful to these students for helping me to also better understand some of these things. I've learned from them. They've helped me improve my own understanding of art and what it is for. And because of that, it's my very great pleasure to be their teacher. And I'm excited to hear them read tonight. And I'm excited to introduce our first reader, Harper Bright.
All right, my name is Harper Bright, and I'm from Greenville, South Carolina. And starting off strong, today I'll be reading an excerpt from my fiction piece, The Day I Realized All Little Boys Are Assholes. The little shit was back, and this time he was wearing his patriotic swim trunks. One big blue star on the left side, split down the middle with fat red stripes on the other side. I had seen him here the day before, squinting at me to make sure I was looking at him before he did something he knew he wasn't supposed to do. His infractions yesterday, seemingly unnoticed by everyone but me, included throwing rocks at his little sister, running after receiving one warning, and running after receiving multiple warnings. I was the one who issued these warnings, marching up to him poolside and scolding him, exacting the only power I had in maintaining order. He'd glare at me and mutter under his breath that I was a butthole who looked like a girl, growling insults until he started to cry, and during my break, the pool manager pulled me aside and asked me why I had it out for the kid. I replied that the kid had it out for me, and my manager told me to knock it off. I left the back room to return to my spot, and the kid grinned a mischievous, toothy smile from the water. There's a picture on the mantle at home in which I'm the same age, with the same wide smile, beaming over an upside-down bucket. Not pictured, under the box, is an assortment of scrapped wire and gunpowder tweaked together in a makeshift bomb. Not pictured is my dad taking the slightly sideways photo with a smile. He let out a hearty laugh when my friend and I approached and asked to raid his shed for supplies for an experiment, unlocking the building and letting the 2 boys run unattended inside. Not pictured the chaos after the thing actually went off in the middle of the yard, blood dripping down my face as my dad dragged me inside, his thick hands gripping on my stick-like forearm. Him screaming until my mom got home, until she saw the dried blood on my cheek and a piece of plastic lodged next to my eyebrow. Not pictured, my dad avoiding eye contact with this photo anytime he enters the room. My mom insists it stays up, one of the only photos of me still from that age, and he stopped protesting years ago. The shorts the little boy wore today looked 2 sizes too big. Moving around the wet concrete on the sides of the pool, he gripped as much of the loose waistband as he could in one hand and held a neon water gun in the other. I watched as he used a reflection of the weapon to blind his younger sister before shooting her square in the face. He waddled away victoriously, waving his gun like a prize. I half-heartedly blew my whistle, asking the menace to stop. He turned his beady eyes to me, and I felt him sizing me up. Then, just as quickly, he shifted his gaze to find his next victim, continuing to run along the edge of the pool. Jumping over a discarded beach ball, his foot caught in the hem of his shorts. Slowly, I watched him trip, bowl cut rising, then falling as his body slammed to the concrete. He stood awkwardly and wiped the blood starting to fall from his nose. An old woman, wearing a suit too tight for her age, approached him and offered him her aid. She said his name, something annoying like Jason or Mason or Grayson. His response was a swift jet of water to her face. I chuckled, remembering when I was his age, swimming up to the girls laying out by the pool and splashing them, using it as an excuse to watch them towel off while huffing. My dad, usually drunk or tipsy on family pool days, would float in the center of the pool with a Coors and tinted sunglasses so that when I would splash the girls with my friends, he could watch too, eyeing them up a little more carnivorously than my friends and I. My mother never noticed, he could have done without the sunglasses and still gotten away with it. My mom usually sat by the kiddie pool with the other young mothers in cheeky one-pieces, talking in the quietest voices they could muster about the neighborhood and the school and the new buildings downtown. These small transgressions weren't damning, but still felt sinful in nature. From atop my tower, I can't stare at the bleached hair or tiny suits without thinking about my mother, without feeling like my father. The other lifeguards talked in the break room about the hottest visitors each day, and I nodded along with their picks until they called me gay because I couldn't name someone. Then I started ranking the visitors with them. Slowly rising from my seat, I remembered the boy. The kid, noticing my movement, ran in the opposite direction. I climbed down the ladder of my chair, quickly following him in his laps around the pool. As I took a step, I slipped in a puddle and fell hard. From the ground, I stared at the blistering sun. There was a reason I never left my chair, and I was reminded of it as a red heat crept into my cheeks. I felt the kid's shadow before seeing the water gun in my face. He held the weapon right in front of my eyes, so I couldn't see him, but I knew he was grinning with satisfaction. I was the real target, the victim he had been hunting the whole time. Then, to my surprise, he lowered the gun, looked at me earnestly, and held his hand out, as if to help me up. I remember the first time my dad took me hunting, how I shot down a deer and sat there crying about it for 30 minutes. My dad, embarrassed, left me behind and continued with his hunt. After I was done, I wiped my tears on my sleeve and grabbed my backpack, hunting instead for my father in the thick brush. I never went hunting again. He never said it, but I knew he was disappointed. The boy seemed to hold something in his eyes, some shred of regret that reminded me of myself in that moment. I met his hand with mine. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cherry Chessman. I'm from Lexington, South Carolina, and today I'll be reading 2 poems. The first one being The Beautiful Shimmering Betrayer I Call Heart and the Cracked Blue Light It Chases After. The heart can fall from you like shoes into a dust-caked canyon. Why should I know why? Maybe it hungers for cake, dusted in powdered sugar, for airy honeycomb that floats apart in the mouth. Maybe the heart crams mouthfuls of air down and chokes when it all tastes like sawdust. Maybe this is why it doesn't bother to ask before it goes. The vagabond, falling again from train car to train car, skinning plastic off seat covers, sending invoices for the free dusting, smile like veins pulsing, shimmering like blood orange flesh, waiting until the night for the pale light to present on rusty tracks. Did you know you look like raining moon dust? The heart asks its incandescent lover. Isn't it pretty? Do you think you and I could go to Venus, somewhere where love grows like midnight figs? Do you think we could watch the ruby dust blown up by the train, stars we can reach? Just us this time. The light's life, arid, is soiled by the heart's gleam. It shines on America's finest wind-thin railways, dust clouds of better lovers hazing its edges. Without question, the train cars get worse, the light clouded. The light's halo, the heart watching it shine the other way. Another dust storm rises from the earth, and the light glides away in drier hands. This is probably when the heart will call you. I'm lost in Arizona or Nevada or some place where there is only dust and devil-hot steel. You will drive to this place, share the old blanket you brought. You can see the heart's glow through the fleece. You must remember the heart follows like dust in chest pockets, but it is not a raw-boned coyote, a cactus with thorns growing inside, the satchel that falls open without prompting. You are dust in the heart's eye, reached for to be pulled out. So you ignore the heart turning away to look outside, its new dusk cherry tint. You will do this until you are the same pile of dust. And then I've got a second poem called Elegy for Young Summer. In hazy, sepia-hot bedrooms, I rewatched mermaid movies with other girls, best friends seen through the gleam of party-favored jewelry, easily fallen into, dreamy as Victorian hand mirror glass. Molten sun burrowed into the vinyl green leaves like a heavenly warper. Wax tasted like cardamom or mulberry or any other beautiful thing my mother could pronounce better than me. So desperately I hunted new things. I called myself adventurer for discovering books in storefront displays. Each passing hour took another horse-sized bite out of me, shaping me into a discount finger puppet ready to be put with my set. Every morning, I would find all my pieces put back, hands rearranged to fit into another girl's, like we could stand close enough together and turn 6 feet tall. So small, the heat always found a way to miss us. We didn't know the HVAC in the attic had a voice, cruel-edged lips, could swallow Uno cards and doll shoes. We ran our fingers through each other's hair to make braids and to ruin them. The shampoo from a strawberry-shaped bottle stuck each strand in between the creases of our palms, fitted flush like plastic blocks. We clawed at the pieces torn from each other, dropped them into the panting breeze, like we'd watch our hair grow back and get long together. Like ice cubes on the patio table we ate our first omelets on. If we had stayed with our curiosity, watched our own hands, we could have seen the drop into this new and misshapen form, how we slid apart, our dissolving pieces smeared behind us until there was nothing, shapeless pools that could never touch, at least not for very long. We shared cotton candy, saltwater taffy, next to a pool of the same color, our dewy hands washing the wax wrappers with sunscreen. We ate them over and over. Each time, the flavor was new. Thank you.
Okay, hello. I'm Dune Adams. I'm from here in Greenville, and I'll be reading an excerpt from a short fiction piece. It's called The Horologist. So basically, there's this woman, she makes clocks, she sells them, and she has this mysterious cuckoo clock that everyone always asks her about. So she tells a story that explains the origin, which is what I'll be reading. So this is The Tale of a Village with No Time. Once, there was a village with no time. It was a drab place. There was no color, and there was no laughter. The citizens were stuck in an eternal dusk, their sky awash with dull blues and grays, the light from the sun too dim to burn, but not dark enough to allow stars to shine. Their footsteps fell frozen on cobblestones, and every day they moved around like ghosts, the sound of their existence hovering helplessly in the air, unable to reach their years. As the years passed, the villagers went on with their days, each one exactly the same as the next and the last, an infinite cycle of dull monotony that stretched on and on and on. In an attempt to bring back time, the villagers took to making clocks. Day after day, the villagers made clocks one after the other in hopes that they could bring the world back to normal. But no matter what type of gears or glue or paint they used, nothing ever worked. The clocks would wake for a moment and tick out a few seconds of blissful life, but then they would shudder and give out, and everything would grind to a halt where it remained stuck and stale. Still, the villagers kept trying, and eventually there were so many clocks they were running out of places to put them. They were stacked on dining room tables and shoved into cupboards and tucked under the dusty quilts of unused beds and stashed in unopened boxes. They littered the streets and floated in the fountains, and not a single one of them worked. As days passed, but time stayed still, the villagers couldn't bear it anymore. They were losing their minds, they said. They missed closing their eyes to sleep. They missed drinking and dancing. They missed tears on their cheeks and bruises from climbing trees. They ached for the sun to finally set again so they could see the stars and breathe. It was like being stuck in the moment before a sneeze, an itch that yearned to be satisfied. So, eventually, the villagers sent word for a horologist. Far and wide, across oceans and continents they called, and offered a great reward to anyone who could succeed and bring time back to them. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Channing. I'm from Somerville, and I'm reading an excerpt from a fiction piece called Cousin V's Dogma, Disgusting Confinement and Domestication of Lions in Your Inner and Outer World 2019. So here's some context. This is about a woman named Shelley who is curious about a lot of things that are hard to answer, and she kind of gets sequestered from her family, and her boyfriend Rocket gets her pregnant, and so she goes to her cousin Veronica's house to kind of like get some advice from her. And Cousin V is kind of a nut. She has like an indentured servant that wears a lion head and her husband is strapped to a tree. So, you know, it's a fun thing we're exploring today. Okay. Then I inquired about the lion man who was at the door, if he was a hybrid of some sort. She told me yes. His name was Sandro, and he was indebted to her. He harvests the wheat outside for her and pours her rosé and skins her snakes for her and lies in bed with her, she said. She fed him bloody steaks. That was all he ate. A diet of raw steak, I thought, was dangerous. V said that was what lions ate, raw meat. I quickly found that my questions would be incessant. V wore the snakeskin sometimes, so God would never give her a child again, and the wheat was for apology biscuits. A couple more of her answers. There's something, Shell, V said. It thought we should be the ones to know that we feel, so now we know, but we don't know what to do with that. A bit short-sighted of V, I thought. We have never known what animals know, or plants. They could carry a burden beyond our grasping. I voiced my thoughts to her, and she asked me to remember the time I was a plant or animal. I have never been either, I said. She told me nobody begins knowing, only remembering, and knowing you are remembering means that you've been chosen. Remembering is a gateway for recognizing feelings, and knowing opens the gateway. Oh, she's full of it, I thought. It was impossible to remember what you knew as a baby. I told her that. Exactly, she replied. That's why they haven't been chosen. We have. Not what I meant. I could hear Auntie Kath saying we were both full of it. We were chosen by nature, and that was that. I wish it was her that I was speaking to. Her answers always left room for some romantic and unsolvable idea. These answers created a cesspit of inconsonance that went on forever, even though she was 100% sure of everything. Auntie Kath was something of a nihilist, I thought. What decided upon the existence of nature? If nature could decide on its own to form, I believe that would make it chosen, but by what or who? I appreciated the whimsy of nature choosing itself. Maybe our ability to choose what to do with our knowledge as nature's nature split up 7.5 billion ways into our nature, I said, minus the babies. I sighed. I could hear Rocket say something like, "Wow, Shell, your voice is so pretty." It was getting to that point, so I decided to end the discussion there. I walked into the small kitchen next. There was a wheat grinder on the island, and the counter was cluttered with plastic seasoning shakers and edible flowers. What caught my eye was a ceramic cookie jar labeled LSD. Captivated, I lifted the lid. No LSD, just butter cookies. V told me I could have as many as I wanted because Sandro's favorite activity is baking. I grabbed 4 to enjoy while I attempted to understand my circumstances. A girl in a sweeping sundress emerged from the hall to the right with her head tilted slightly downward and her stringy arms behind her back. Her face was rigid, like a sad marionette. I guessed she could have been 15 or 14. V said I was right. The girl was her teenager. V named her Maudlin after her favorite word, and I told her that was utterly evil. Maudlin joined V on the sofa and tucked herself under her mother's arm. It was strange, I thought, that Maudlin had V's eyes, bone structure, and full eyebrows, but her skin had scarcely been affected by Saint's beige complexion. V explained that Maudlin was not Saint's baby. She was Sandro's baby, and she had been incredibly pragmatic, bloody, and painful to have. V felt so sober, more than she ever had in her life. Why with Sandro, I asked, when she had a husband? She explained it to me casually, as if I had asked her about a stranger she sometimes saw at the hobby shop. It would have been awkward, for one, since her husband was tied to a tree. Saint was also not attractive. He had thin, red lips, a Paleolithic brow bone, and grappled with intercourse like his body was attacking itself. He had only conversed about a single god, but it always felt fabricated and frightened. Sandro was handsome, I had to take her word for it, and had no urge to fake anything. He quickly became domesticated. He was chosen and suffered, knew he wasn't happy, knew not how to fight it, knew he should not and could not, but felt like he must, and knew he felt that way, didn't know how to say it. V knew he was perfect, and she couldn't help it. I asked her why she married Saint at all, and she held up her right ring finger. I asked her if it was authentic 14-karat Swarovski, and she said she did not know, but her cat adored playing with shiny objects. It was precious. Maudlin appeared unflinching at Cousin V's words. Likely, she already knew. I wondered if she understood. I asked her. No, she told me in a voice that matched her face. She didn't get it at all. I had to press her about her day, how she felt, what she knew. My morning I spent in my room. Then I played pickup sticks with Daddy in the yard. He plays with his toes. Sandro made me a jam sandwich. Then I played with the cat. Sandro ran a lemon bath for me. I took a bath. Sandro made a steak. I had to recite Venus's swans, but I messed up, so I didn't get to toss the scraps to Sandro. Mommy did. Ask Mommy to recite Venus's swans. I asked V to recite Venus's swans, and she shrugged. All of it sounded ludicrous to me. I could not help but wonder if Maudlin was joking. Perhaps she was one of those joke tellers that never laughed at herself. How do you get a 14-year-old to memorize Venus's swans in any way? I asked V. She wistfully scanned the room, now overcast with sunset reflecting sunset through the glass door. She chose the perfect thing, she told me. the perfect companion and the perfect teenager with feet to uproot and the perfect man to give her a home, but he was too submerged himself to grab a hold of, so he was bound, anchored in a reasonable place. Her cesspit of inconsonance, I thought. Her cesspit of my inconsonance. V squeezed her daughter close to her. Shelley, a baby can be a gift if you want it. They don't suggest your existence. They cry and wail and pee and poo it. Or would you prefer I say defecate? I don't know, I replied. Yes, well, they defecate. So the gift you're unwrapping is actually a diaper with your existence in poo form. It's sadistic, it's undeniable. I'm done talking about it because it's so disgusting. God is cruel, Shelley. Imagine it's your birthday and you open a present and blood and slime and waste spills out everywhere for your entire life. It never stops coming out. Just mutant feculence pouring out constantly, and it floods your entire life for your entire life. Wow. But it's a gift because you can take it all and dump it into a large tank, a tank that belongs to you, where everything can swim, no matter how heavy. You just have to get the tank and dump it. That's all. Well, is it a gift or not? It's what you decide it is. I had 6 months to decide. A while, I thought, but I knew it would ambush me in my state of dreaming. I felt one of them kicking, the baby, uncertainty, or the butter cookies. I did not need to eat 4. I, myself, did not. My life was already being flooded right before my eyes. V saw it somehow. She saw it before I had ever recognized the idea of a child, which was the same time I had become pregnant. Quickly, I needed a vessel for it, the existence that was stretching me, because I knew it would come out no matter what I wanted. It would burst forth and flood my entire life, for my entire life like a hurricane. Undeniable and sadistic and chosen by nature. Auntie Kath would be rejoicing, I knew it. Auntie Kath was something of a sadist, I thought. You're sobering up, Shell. Pick up your phone and contain it, Shell. It's your world, Shell. Contain it. Lions are powerful, but they end up in cages, Shell. V urged me and continued to urge me as I was reeling. Her words were clear among the sharp holler, the whipping wind. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lizzie Lindsay, and I'm from here in Greenville. Okay, I'm going to be reading 2 poems tonight, and the first one's called The Woman on the Bus. A ghost of a woman she was, with ovals dark and round, suns underneath her eyes, a centerpiece for a hollowed face. Slender, or sleek, I should say, skin against bone. She had a smoker's mind, and when I met her on the bus, she asked me when the next stop would be, as if I would know. She had a tarnished faux leather purse to hold her secrets, wrapped in a baby's cloth or a basilisk's skin. With bare fingernails and all the pink underneath, I imagined she liked to scratch mailboxes before she opened them. She always got her mail early in the morning. Feeding off of letters, she loved writing them to past lovers or the deceased, people who no longer thought of her, people who'd never respond. She'd write with all her pencils and sins laid out in front of her, carefully choosing which to utilize. She would craft these like eulogies, perfectly written bits of misery or nostalgia, if you want to call it that. Licking the envelope like knife against cobblestone, melting wax to stamp and capture, I guess she wanted everything, then, here, and there, while I just asked if she wanted to come home with me. I guess we were both lonely enough to make that trip. As my guest, I gave her coffee she didn't take, tea she didn't like, just water because she could see through it. It was like she waited in between when time comes and when it falls, and held cigarette smoke that stuck to the sides, wanting to unveil her and leave her with nothing, to hold up that muted heart of hers, I know it's there, and sew it against mine. Instead, she left me with nothing except her cigarette ashes and a letter. Okay, thank you. And the second poem is called To the Carolina Foothills. Given to the glory of God and in the living memory of a self-proclaimed sanctuary. My mother and I live against you, in a suburb in South Carolina where, like ghosts, her plants grow, the pomegranate tree in her garden leaning against the picked-apart wood of an immigrant's porch. attracting greedy hands that can only belong to a child or a poet. Children eat pomegranate seeds and their mother's words only to spit them back out, outgrowing her prayers. Even though my mother, a pistol of a woman, doesn't view flowers as flowers, but instead as medicine, and stores roots of strange-worded herbs and leaves of her ailments among cabinets, she does believe in growth, but not cleanly. Growth to her looks like the caramelized residue in bowls piled up in the sink for her kids to worship over, or old tea bags and plants, their broken pots. When my best friend, who's a hippie, tells me tea bags are not good for plants, I can't remember if they are or not, because eventually routine and my reverence becomes fixed, holds me still and unchanged against my judgment and against hers. My mother and her flowers fade permanently to the front of my life alongside this remembered town where nothing changes much, except when we'd hike up your overgrown roots. Devoted to the wild, my mother would take me on nature trails, foraging for edible mushrooms or the heart of Jesus. Canopied and sheltered against southern heat, in your Carolina foothills, we both stood at the bottom of your mountain, errant and artless, and I can't believe that you cannot grow under your weight, only shed. Thank you.
Oh, there's a pencil up here. Hello, I am Isabel Garcia from Central, South Carolina. And this is an excerpt from a fiction piece I wrote called Precipice. I arrived early to the bus stop at precisely 5 o'clock, an hour before the bus's scheduled arrival, shaking rain out of my hair and stamping my boots on the concrete below me in a vain attempt to dry myself. It had been raining for over a week, and great oily puddles stretched across pavement and sidewalks, pooling in alleyways and under trash cans. Through the rain, my blue-roofed bus stop, illuminated by the faint light of a street light just before it and to its left, seemed to me almost an altar, or perhaps some kind of church. I always arrive early to my bus stop. The bus is fickle. It is late just as often as it's early. On the days it is late, I enjoy a brief respite in the scent of cigarette smoke that hangs around the shelter, despite the fact that I had never seen anyone but me inside it before. I do not smoke, but consider it a frankincense of sorts. Following this, the bus stop must surely be a church, one where I might spend my time waiting under its little blue roof in quiet contemplation, or perhaps listening to the rain peeing against its surface. These moments, however short or long, are deeply precious to me. However, on this day, to my great annoyance, the bus stop was occupied. Some old woman, unimportant, no doubt, sat inside the stop's shelter, slumped over on the bench. Thin strands of gray hair curled out around her aged face, downturned. They just barely brushed against the filthy coats and scarves of many patterns that she wore. She sat with a shoulder pressed up against a cluster of faded posters, one for a missing dog, two for missing cats, and one advertising a small-scale cleaning service. Her hands, gloved, clutched some old scraps of paper, or maybe they were cards. It was hard to make out in the darkness, and besides, I didn't want to look. Her presence here, in this shelter, was a violation, some terrible sin. How dare she step foot in, intrude upon my holy ground, a place I can recall better than my own face? I know each detail of its interior intimately, the advertisements and posters plastered to its sides, the stickers and graffiti on both it and the bench, the pieces of gum plastered on it at intervals, and the tobacco stains on the ground. How dare she sully my refuge? Someone as clearly unimportant, as plainly worthless as her? With deep breaths, I composed myself, smoothed back my wet hair. Forcing every muscle into calm motion, into obedience, I thrust myself onto the opposite side of the bench, rattling it with my movement, and, with shaking hands, wrapped my soggy coat tighter around my torso. In this way, I stared out into the early morning, the street lamp transforming the darkness into a perfect, familiar gray veil in which moths hung. I watched the moths flutter in between the raindrops bouncing off of the bus stop's shelter's roof, my leg beginning to bounce as I tried to lose myself in their motion. That old woman, why was she here? To my right, there was a rustling of paper. A weak, soggy cough. I flinched. There was another rustling, another cough. I looked down at the watch strapped around my wrist with a band of worn leather. 5 minutes passed. Grinding my teeth together, I stuffed my hand into a pocket. It was at this point that there was a small tug on my right sleeve. Thank you.
Hello, I am Quinn Rondo from Hartsville, South Carolina, and today I will be reading 2 poems for you. The first one is called I Sit by the River. I sit by the river, watching as a branch flows down another path, ever so carefully carved over thousands of years by a force stronger than everything around it, cut to nobody's liking. It is out of control, left on a path it thinks was created not for itself, but for those who plan their lives, those who planned out their successes, losses, everything. The branch is soon caught at an impasse, rocks at the edge of a waterfall, powerful enough to pull the strongest of grips, yet the branch is left at its crest. Does it stay in its comfort, a stagnant point of safety, or does it fall down into a world of uncertainty? It does not know. It cannot tell what is ahead, what came before, what any of it means. It is a passenger on a train not meant for them. It cannot notice its wake, how it cut through the water, splitting it into 2, creating another option, another path for those who will come after them. It does not need to continue, as it has created more than it could ever see. The next poem is called Elegy for the Fallen Gunslinger. The sand caresses your feet as whiptails pick at your ears, your fingers still frozen in time, wrapped around the ivory grips you so carefully picked out as to look better in a museum, but they won't be found, your fate already forgotten, the only witness long gone, dried out and dying 100 yards away. And for what? You searched for fame, glory, a name in a place where names are blown like the spindly shrubs thrown about by the arid breeze, left to dry you from a burnt crimson to a crisp earth. Your name won't be spoken again, but you shall live on, perhaps as a landmark on the road further west, or just food for the next Gila to pass. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Erica Holmes. I'm from Columbia, and I will be reading an excerpt of a fiction piece called The Miracle Worker and His Host. It was close to midnight when Cecilia slightly leaned out of the window of her car so that the old microphone at the shady Wendy's drive-thru could pick up her voice. Yeah, so could I get 2 4-for-4s? One with Sprite and honey mustard and the other. Cecilia looked over to her newest buddy. What do you want? He was a Jesus cosplayer, sitting with his back away from the stained polyester seats. His eyes focused on the car parked ahead of them in line, only taking a few side glances at her. He had black hair, tanned skin, a hooked nose, dark brown robes, and a crown of thorns. His costume was too on the nose, but it looked nice. She addressed him. What do you want? Jesus swiped beneath his nose and smiled, something filling. His dark eyes darted to her, then back ahead. He tapped his fingers rhythmically along the dashboard, humming along to Shape of You by Ed Sheeran. Cecilia rolled her eyes and turned back to the receiver. Could I have the same thing for the second meal? Okay. Your total is $8.48. Drive up to the first window. There was a car in front of Cecilia's, a large red minivan with reflective stickers covering the bumper and trunk. Class of 2017 was written in yellow and pink stickers, and she couldn't help but think of how much of a pain that would be to get off of all the sticky residue that'd be left behind. After a quiet moment of staring at stickers and listening to pop, their food was ready, and Cecilia pulled off onto the dark road. Jesus scrunched his nose and inspected the burger. Gooey cheese melted into the square patty with mustard and ketchup. This is dairy. He jabbed his thumb to the bright yellow cheese, right? Cecilia nodded, keeping her eyes on the road and slurping her tingly drink. It's cheese. Why is it yellow? He murmured to himself, rewrapping the burger in its silver and red tin foil. He placed it back into the bag and pulled out some fries. He inspected them before experimentally placing one into his mouth. He hummed and nodded his head. He pointed to the somewhat soggy red and white container. This stuff is delicious. He popped more fries into his mouth and Cecilia stared straight ahead. Cecilia's frown deepened as the strange man commented on everything he ate. She was expecting to have an easy evening of food and maybe an episode or two of Scandal before she went to bed, not hosting a stranger and giving him a ride back to her place. She sniffled. Maybe the universe shared a dislike of her monotonous life and wanted to help her spice it up. He had been sitting in a parking lot beneath a street lamp with his hands pressed tightly together and his forehead to the dirt. Her heart, being warm and easy to tug, reached out to the man. She didn't have anything better to do, so why not help him? After all, the worst thing he could do is murder her, she thought. Her apartment was bare bones with just a cozy red couch gifted by her parents. A small coffee table with a hand-cranked radio sat in a corner, a flat-screen TV she seldomly watched, and a plain green rug. Luckily, the cherry wood floors were freshly mopped and the dust that would settle into a thin layer was swept away. "This is nice," Jesus said. Cecilia looked around again. She thought he must have been incredibly poor to think this was nice, but when he looked at him again, something about his presence there did seem to make the room look nicer. "Cool lamp," he said. "I love the light. Yellow, warm. It's beautiful. You can stay on the couch." Cecilia took a pillow from her bed and gave it to Jesus, who gratefully accepted. She left him to pray and went straight to bed. She woke up before the sun had a chance to warm up and shine brightly through her windows. She dressed in a monochromatic outfit for work and went out into her living room to scrutinize the man that curled on her couch. She didn't notice how bony he was or how filthy his feet were and how they dirtied her couch before. She cringed. She didn't stare at him long before she'd left the house and rushed off to work. Cecilia placed both hands on a wheel and looked between the bus, the stoplight, and the brightening horizon. Come on. She drummed her fingers along the wheel, silently rushing the little children along. Truthfully, the children should be staying at home with their parents. It's not like they would benefit from learning when their futures were so uncertain. Damn it! Cecilia pulled down the sun visor to protect her eyes from the harsh beams of the mounting star. She squinted as she drove through traffic to her job. The hospital was just off the main strip and still a frequent stop for most due to careless mistakes. The demands was so high for staff that the woman couldn't resist signing up for the deceptively simple task of sitting at the front desk of the ER. If only she thought of more than the money, she would realize that she'd constantly be interacting with people and their injuries. She pulled into the parking lot behind the hospital and sat with her forehead to the wheel. She groaned loudly before getting out and entering the building. She greeted the overnight nurses that sat with their faces buried in their hands and poured herself a lukewarm cup of coffee. She swapped out with a chair at the front desk and nodded cordially with Meryl. Cecilia liked Meryl. She didn't speak any more than she had to. But as all things, the good ended when Meryl swapped as Cecilia's favorite person. "Cecilia, hey!" There went Ricky. Cecilia shook her head, groaning, before looking up at Ricky. Her coworker smiled, took Meryl's spot. Ricky was dark-skinned with a bulbous nose, round eyes, and big ears. She wore a nice pair of blue jeans, a belt with a bronze buckle, pink Skechers, and a white shirt beneath a pink blazer. She took out a sparkly pink notebook labeled check-in and a black Bic pen. "Hi," Cecilia smiled briefly, before staring forward at the mostly empty waiting room. She didn't turn back towards the woman, nor indulge in any conversation about her family. She shuddered thinking of Ricky's family. Why would that woman have a child? That child would barely see the sun and stars. It would live in a world deprived of anything but expectant politeness and supplied only with buzzing artificial light. As soon as it entered, the thought was expelled from Cecilia's mind. It was none of her business as to what her coworker does. That's her life. Cecilia's life was jotting down names, insurance companies, and taking copies of insurance cards for the billing department. She still helped others, whether it be at work or at home. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is River Raphael. I'm from Myrtle Beach, and today I'll be reading a piece from our nonfiction class titled Testing a Theory. When you're being chased by a lion, do you start singing? No, Candy tells me, which is exactly why you should sing when you're stressed, so your body knows that you're not actually being chased by a lion. I sit on a small green plastic chair and nod my head, just like I've done every Wednesday right after school for 2 years in a row. Candy is the therapist for children, and when my older sister began puberty, my mom decided that the whole family needed some form of therapy, so I started in elementary school. Although Candy's practices were usually a little wonky, I dutifully tried out each. I traced my hand like a turkey when I was mad, jumped up and down like a warrior when I was anxious, looked at myself in the mirror and said 10 kind things when I cried. It was a tradition to try and fail to cheer myself up with her methods. During our last visit, she said, if you think you hate everyone, eat. If you think everyone hates you, sleep. And if you think you hate yourself, shower. Now it's years later and the weekly anniversary of our old appointments. Tomorrow, break will be over and I will make the long trip back to school. I'm stuck between savoring the time and feeling it slip away from me. The last day of anything is tinged bitter with the fact that it's almost over, and now that I know I'll be returning to school, my stress sits in front of me as a silent taunt. I want the day to be a good one, so I decide it's finally time to test her theory. I take a shower and it doesn't calm me down, so I tweak her method. If I swim in a pool, then I have to feel calm, because being submerged in water must be better than just being freckled by it. Which is why at the beginning of winter, I beg my little sister to go to our neighborhood pool with me. Our neighborhood mostly consists of elderly couples, so the HOA doesn't expect anyone to hop the pool's fence, and they leave the pool uncovered. As Canyon and I race our bikes down the sidewalk, I feel the jagged skin of my fingers rub against the handlebars. Somehow my skin is both calloused and raw. When I'm stressed, I pick at my eczema, and lately I spend most classes discreetly clawing at my hand under a table. When Canyon and I get to the pool, I set my phone on the edge of the water with the music turned all the way up. We hold hands and jump in together. It's colder than I expected. The kind of cold that knocks the oxygen out of your lungs. I lose Canyon's hand in the water and try to kick my way to the surface, but my body resists the movement. I could just stand up, but my feet are kicking and I can't feel the ground beneath me. When I rise to the surface, Canyon is already wrapped around me with her teeth chattering. My inhales are slow and my exhales are jagged until I grow accustomed to the water. Canyon's body refuses to float. Even when my hand pushes her up, her weight wants to settle into the bottom of the pool. I don't know how to teach her, so I try to model it. Let my limbs lose their tension, tilt my head backwards, and allow the water to lift me up. I gently swirl my hands to remain at the top. She gives up trying, and I float by myself. I need to be calm. I hum, feel the non-words as they vibrate in my throat. I don't exactly feel calm, but I don't feel not calm. I feel like nothing. I lack distinction. Like a rock without any edges or a piece of chocolate melted in the sun, my thoughts drift just out of reach. My goosebumps have finally sunken back into my skin, and the water finally feels not freezing. I slow float over to the ladder. Canyon and I both know it'll be colder when we get out, so we try to prolong it. To hold on to the calm, I dive under the water one more time. Thank y'all.
Hi guys. My name is Tatiana Fosnat. I'm from Somerville, South Carolina, and I will be reading an excerpt from a fiction piece titled Somewhere Else Entirely. The first black hole opened in a Walmart on South Main, and Irene was clocked out when it happened. Any other day, she would have been grateful for the time away, which she mostly spent sunk into her granddad's old leather recliner, the muted fresco of a midlife crisis, with Tabby tucked tight like a pincushion atop her lap and purring like a motor. But that morning, Irene had sat for brunch with her mother, which never left her quite so composed. They first discussed Irene's love life, to a greater degree than she was precisely comfortable with. I'm just saying, how long has it been since you... Her mother had paused right then to shake some salt onto her cocktail napkin, and Irene could barely taste the bite of bile. Well, you know. Later topics included work, retirement, some second cousin's third wedding. Then things swung back around, as they always did, to the degree. You could still go back to school. Her mother had been making this same argument since Irene was 25, when she still wore her septum ring and mutilated her hair with bi-monthly bleach, back when she was still bright and shiny and any sort of promising. I'm just saying. Irene's mother was always just saying something. She left the cafe feeling a little like soured yogurt, a little like a spare sock, and drove straight toward the all too familiar corner at Central and South Main, trying to convince herself that the day could still be salvaged, that she could at least laugh at some kid in the toy department squeezing through the wires of the two-story ball rack, get home, thaw some frozen lasagna, and watch the new Wheel of Fortune episode with Tabby snug between her hip and the chair's peeling armrest, that she was not, in fact, a total loser, that she did, in fact, like her job. And maybe she did, in the beginning. It was the first thing Irene had been any good at since starting for her master's. She even won Employee of the Month, October and November straight. Doug had called her into his office to tell her. When I saw someone with your credentials, your education, he was seated on the edge of his desk and pointing his index finger, which to Irene roughly resembled a badly packaged chain-link sausage, down at her file. I couldn't think of a single reason you'd ever want to work here. Doug leaned forward, far enough that it must have taken considerable effort not to fall right on top of her. But after these first few months, I might just understand. He whispered this next part like a secret, like Donna from pharmacy might have a discreet ear pressed against the dented steel door. You get it, don't you? Irene lowered her voice as well, if only because the shift in tone made her feel mildly important, as if this was some kind of debriefing on classified intel. Get what? You understand, Doug said, and he made a fisted motion, pulling at his chest. You understand what Walmart is, what it does for people. Do I? Irene asked. Walmart is a symbol. Doug slid off the desk and approached his single 2x2 window, tilting the blinds to gaze out over the bicycle aisle, and Irene got the sense that he was no longer talking to her. We provide people not only with what they want, but what they need, really need, whether they knew they needed it or not. He turned back to the wall behind his desk, where he had framed his own Employee of the Month headshot from years long past. This is a legacy, Irene. It was nice to know he still remembered she was there. Something that goes beyond you or me. This is what we give to the world. This is what we leave behind. With that, he tucked her photo between the sheaths of a clear binder sleeve and push-pinned it beside the golf tees. Thank you.
Audio. Hello, I'm Indigo Nath. I'm from Anderson, South Carolina, and I'm going to be reading a piece of nonfiction. Gotta take a breath for this one, sorry. All right. It's called Because We Don't Want School Food Seasoned with Microplastics. And because we can buy groceries there, my sweet mate and I are waiting in line at the Publix deli, watching an old bald black man who's in a hairnet for some reason wrap the previous customer's chicken tender sub. They're chattering in snippets I can barely hear because of a splitting sinus infection in my left ear. There's this horrible pshing sound, and there are like cockroaches laid their eggs and hatched inside my ossicles. And as the old man leaves the counter, a new employee takes his place. The name card says Esther, who's choking his black hair in a tight bun, which he now suddenly brandishes at us as he lolls his skull at the neck and slams his palms to the table. And I can barely hear him say to me and my sweet mate over my pshing ear that, oh, sorry, I need to remember how to breathe. What the hell does forgetting how to breathe mean? I hope he isn't one of those sociable employees who tries to make stuffy conversation while the customer slaps on a silent fake smile. I'd rather brood over the 200-year-old poems for AP Literature that I'm going to need to BS a caring response to later. I'm just waiting for our short stories unit. As Esther grabs a handful of weighty chicken strips, he stops to ask us, in the few fragments that leak through my infected ear, if you know that gonads develop before the brain in fetuses, which I guess I didn't. Cool. But I just want to eat my sandwich with my sweet mate back in our dorm as we mutually ignore upcoming college application deadlines. And my pounding ear catches Esther say that, oh, you go to the governor's school. That's where they dump the special kids and queers. I really didn't want to think about school right now. I usually shut down gnawing college thoughts by rotting my brain with hour-long YouTube video essays. But for now, I just sigh, because who am I to rag on a supermarket deli wage slave? But now Esther's panting over my unmayoed bread, hands gripping the counter. Maybe he forgot how to breathe again. And his mouth sputters that the reception desk is not open in my brain today. He's kind of shaking. His eyes are bloodshot. He's slurring his words as they slip out of his mouth, and I can see now that he's written something in Sharpie on his right forearm, but he can't hold it still for long enough for me to read it. and I realize that he's probably tweaking out on an edible or something. As he keeps babbling about his tattoo, I can't hear any of it because my left ear has been bloated for about like 3 weeks now, actually. I only use my right AirPod, and it's kind of hard to write poetry commentary while only beating one half of my brain to pulp with music, so I've been a little pissed off for a while. And Esther's testing my patience as he haphazardly scatters lettuce across chicken draped in melted provolone. And maybe it's stupid of me to let this get at me, but sometimes it all piles up. This damn ear. Esther giggles and twitches, but obviously I don't catch the joke. This half-finished sub with Pepper House gourmet sauce bleeding into the breading. Esther's breathing breaks, poems, college, all of it. They cling to me like a bug sculling up my spine, searching for a blood meal. I just want to brush it off and stomp it into a squeaky brown paste, but instead I'm stuck here waiting at this Publix deli because this floppy sandwich jockey probably hit a cart before making my sandwich. Now, though, as Esther folds banana peppers between chicken chunks, his face kind of seems to soften, and he speaks in smooth sentences with my sweet mate about something that my ear refuses to tune into again. But I can't catch him here say that customer service is a performance art. And his spindly arms have kind of stopped their gyrating, so as he finally hands us our sandwiches, he kind of smiles. It's crinkling almost kindly, as he does. And as we walk to the checkout, another employee starts arguing with Esther and shouts that I can barely catch in my eardrums. And I almost feel bad because this performance probably tanked his job. But instead, I clutch my sympathy to my chest and keep fuming because I have eardrops to take, I have poems to read, and I have to go pay for this already cold sub.
Hi everyone, I'm Maya Sinclair from Greenville, South Carolina, and tonight I'm going to be reading a flash fiction piece and a poem. I'm going to start with the former. This is called Experiment. He was convinced that everything was awful and sought to prove whether it was or was not. He biked because cars' carbon emissions were awful to an office supply store, the nearest, because wasted time was awful. He bought 2 lined notebooks, expensive ones, because spending money was awful, but skimping on quality even more so. Whenever something good happened, he described it in one notebook. Whenever something bad happened, he described it in the other. The wait for an elevator took too long for his liking, and that went in the bad things notebook. He found a coupon for a fast food place that was marginally less awful than all others, and that went in the good things notebook. He continued this experiment for a year. At its conclusion, he spread open his notebooks and counted the number of observations, happenings, and coincidences in each. He found that he'd taken note of 483 good things, but only 305 bad ones. His own memory proved fickle. His coworker's resignation and a family reunion recorded in the good things notebook, despite his unfavorable recollections of them. Counted 2, 3, 4 more times. He turned to whatever resource seemed to have expertise on matters of human nature or society. Yet after 2 weeks, he had no explanation for these results. He went on a walk that evening, having much to consider but little to do. As twilight dawned, he reached a cobbled road. Every time, the noise of his footfalls against the stones startled and unnerved him. He didn't remember the pleasure he'd taken in writing about each bad thing, nor did he recall how quick he'd been to finish describing each good one, or his eagerness to dismiss each as secretly also awful. He just ventured to a quiet back street to which he had never been, where there was little enough light to see the night's first stars. They glittered in the darkness, speaking in vocabulary he nearly understood. Okay, this is an ekphrastic poem after the Counting Crows song Mrs. Pollard's Lullaby. Does anyone know it? My parents aren't allowed to answer. Yeah. Oh my God, my junior! I love you, Ellison. Okay. Okay, I'm going to start reading it now. This is called I Host a House Party and Time Collides. When did I forget all my guests' names? It's golden hour, and they're taking advantage of it, sprawled out like toy soldiers by the pool, haunting the snack bar and my sun-warmed kitchen. And if the pit in my stomach gets any tighter, it will damage the organ. Better question. When did I forget my own name? It had a small number of letters, I think 3 or 4 or 5, and if you rearranged them, they meant something else. I'm pondering this, so near a revelation about myself and the universe, when I'm interrupted by a lack of an interruption. The pretty, self-assured blonde I added to the guest list, despite barely knowing her, passes me right by. I've forgotten her name too, but there's a book character who shares it, and that feels important. In my head, she's known and cherished the fact that I exist for years. In my head, I sprint up to her, and we laugh, hug, tell stories, basking in the ease of our every interaction. In my head, I sit next to her on her hospital bed, listening to her complaints about the constant drone of medical machinery and the discomfort her IV drip causes her. In my head, my dad dies, and she folds her arm around my shoulder, its warm weight rejuvenating, like the saltwater scent of the ocean. In my head, she and I leave this party, which was never very fun anyway, and which I hosted out of a sense of obligation, together. In reality, I stand, somewhat unsure if I'm doing so correctly, by the kitchen sink and start planning my funeral. There will be balloons, so many of them, and they'll be colorful too, blue and yellow and red, none of that dark, mournful nonsense. And every one of them will float away, laid to rest by the sky and by time. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bianca Beso, and I'm from Lexington, South Carolina. Today, I will be reading 3 poems, and this first one is titled Praise the Peace. Praise the peace and our tired bones bringing it to life. Praise the open blinds and apartment windows, the people on their couch in front of their TV after work. Praise the street lights, warm glowing, the workers walking underneath, the way we lean over the roof ledge, looking at the street from above. Praise the tree under the light, its changing colors, the shriveled leaves on the sidewalk. Praise the easy flow of words, the comfort of listening, the way I take a breath before a sentence. Praise our lungs that still fill with air. We are here no matter our past. Praise our past that has led us here. The ending of loves, the history we tell each other, and the humidity of this November night. Praise the drizzle as it starts, the way it hits my hand first, then my cheek as I look up. Praise the rain that pours, the hair it presses to your face. Praise the clothes that stick. We laugh at the fleeting thought of the umbrella we should have grabbed. Praise the puddle you stepped in. Curse at how your sock is soggy in your shoe. Praise the building runoff I walk under, water trickling down my back. Praise the peace and our tired bones bringing it to life. Thank you. For my second poem, it's titled Reverence, and it jumps between English and Spanish. Reverence. In a car, a girl fidgets next to her father. She prays the words he taught her. Dios te salve Maria, llena eres de gracia. She thinks of the girl with the soft smile who runs her fingers across her arm. A text lights up her phone. She flips it over. El Señor es contigo. Bendita tú eres entre todas las mujeres. Outside the window, leaves cautiously fall to the ground. They blur as her father drives past. Y bendito es el fruto de tu vientre, Jesús. He knows of the girl who makes his daughter smile. He has heard the hushed laughter well after she was supposed to sleep. Santa Maria, Madre de Dios. The father prays for the world to be kind to his daughter. Ruega por nosotros los pecadores, ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. The daughter opens her mouth to speak. Amen. For my third poem, it's titled Follow. Follow. My mother always stands tall. She places a hand on my shoulder and pushes me when my back begins to arch in the spot where I sit. Her face stays unflinching when she fights, and a calm voice when others begin to yell. Tears stain my blouse as someone starts to raise their voice about forgetting to do the dishes. My mother is always strong. She wrangles the men at parties into the kitchen, ordering them to cut pomegranate and bring the pork from the oven to the table spread outside. On the summer mornings, when my father walks the dog around the neighborhood, she walks behind him, through the pasture by our house. She holds a hand over her face for protection from the sun. Her other hand holds me tightly. I follow closely behind. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eloise Hill. I'm from Chapin, South Carolina, and I'm going to be reading a nonfiction piece called Dream One, Take My Teeth. I put my hand to my mouth to see if I still have my teeth, or if that new lanky hippie therapist stole them. I have them, but they feel mushy. I bite my nails and see if they still peel off. I flop back into my mattress with springs curling into the fat and muscle of my back. I am almost back asleep before I realize my shoulders are all the way up to my ear. My violin teacher tells me during most of our lessons to take a deep breath and put my whole arm weight into the string while I play. The starch on her pants looks scratchy, and I can feel my iPad camera staring at me. I'm supposed to savor every moment of her insight and obsess over our lesson videos. Even when I push my shoulders lower, making it my mission to dislocate them, there's still tension. Only now it's intentional. My shoulders drag down and slope into my violin, and I hope no one can see my nervous stiffness. In the dream, my real therapist, Miss Buffy, is in my middle school, leaning back in her chair in an empty classroom. She tells me that we need to take your teeth out. It's your muscles. They're tight, like a shriek caught in your throat. She promises me that the anxiety in my body will finally be released. I don't know why she has to take something from me in order to make me better. I tell her I don't want to do the procedure. Miss Buffy says she can't help me, and she looks disappointed that I won't consent to what she thinks healing is. It isn't long until my father sends me to some hippie therapist with a crisp haircut and a tie-dye couch who also wants my teeth. The therapist makes up some stupid excuse. You can't keep grinding your teeth, or negativity will keep circling through your body forever. He orders this tall woman and short balding man to grab me, but I run past them into the school hallway and into another classroom and climb onto a chair and then a bookshelf and then into the ceiling through a tile. I shimmy the tile back into place and wait there, breathing with no noise. Now, under my crumpled, frayed comforter, I think back to Miss Buffy. Every Thursday at 5 o'clock on her velvety couch, I closed my eyes hoping to remember something in the Eigengrau. Flashes of a woman's leg twitching like a dead cockroach, of the woman's leg bouncing as I sink into her lap needing to be held, of a woman's forehead, wrinkles raising towards her bleach blonde hair, concerned. My therapist sat there anticipating my hypnosis or psychosis. I lay into my mattress, and I push my shoulders down. I hold them there, stretching or pressing. That tie-dye therapist must have thought he would heal me with all that talk of negativity circling. But now I'm laying here, aware. My shoulders curve up into my neck, somewhere comforting, where it's hard to breathe deep. The way my dream ended was the worst, mostly because I wish it was real. They found me in the night. All that was left in my mouth was the silk sewn into my gums. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Anna Castro Spratt and I'm from Greenville. And to finish us off tonight, I'm going to read two poems that are kind of about like modern womanhood. And the first is titled Bride of Frankenstein to the 21st Century Woman. They called me into being, threaded sinew through silence, stitched a face from fragments and swore it was mine. I was made to be seen, not to see, a promise they forced into flesh, rib into Eve, death into bride. They have always called it creation when they carve us into something they can hold. He called me wife before I could speak, like naming a storm and thinking it tamed, as if the hurricane owes stillness to the sea. His gaze, a needle tugging at my edges, pulling me tighter, smaller, until I was nothing but a pattern to recognize, admire, like wind and rain spinning into something uncontrollable. I gathered myself. Every inch of me was accounted for, every scar a tally of their wanting. They said I was whole, but I knew I was only a sum of pieces, none of them mine. What is a body if it never belonged to itself? They taught me stillness. They taught me sweetness. They taught me fighting fear unfinishable. But I was born of endless energy, and nothing struck by lightning stays still for long. I've learned the trick of the needle and thread. They thought they bound me, but they only taught me to unseam myself, to pull every stitch until I stood raw and unbeautiful in the dark. Listen, they fear a woman who knows where her edges begin. When they call you angel, remember that heaven was never built for you, that wings are only another way to keep us from the ground. When they call you his, leave claw marks on the door and then stitch him back together. And the second poem is titled Elegy to Little Southern Baby Doll Girl. Little Southern Baby Doll Girl was trapped until she climbed out of her box and Southern Daddy pressed her back into it. Little Southern Baby Doll Girl led a revolution until Southern Daddy, toy maker, wrapped her back up in tissue paper tendrils. Woven woman, USA made, plastic sheet separating her from real world, just where he wants her, stuck and stood and shallow graved under the shadow of the magnolia tree. Fascinator feather peeking above ground, fascinated by the smoke black skies. Startled by the smoke-black skies, baby doll girl's porcelain hands carried little southern fans, unwound in pattern, flowers, art in the pursuit of release and cool truth displayed. When the dirt gathered in mounds on baby doll girl, she was angry and dirty, and she thought she might come back again. But we all think we can come back when sometimes we are where we are meant to be, how we are meant to be, says Southern Daddy, neck white under the cool shade of his unashamed victory. She misses when he rocked her to sleep. Dozed skin to porcelain skin until his knuckles hardened, eager to crack the necks of daughters and wives, and they question, is this the farthest we will ever get? Died twice but vowed to resurrect after both. Maybe she's given up this time. Maybe she's quiet for weeks, buried shallow under the shadow of magnolia tree hills where her owner has left her, forgotten for now. And maybe the revolution is still coming. Thank you.
Let's give another hand to these writers and this amazing reading. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for being here. I would like to say a quick thanks to Emily Cinquemane, Scott Gould right over here in the corner for teaching these students so well, Austin Wilson somewhere in the universe as well. Have a great night. Thank you all for being here. Take care.